The rain hit New York City hard that November night, turning the streets into shiny mirrors that reflected the colorful city lights. The sidewalks were slippery and crowded with people, all rushing to get out of the rain. Pedestrians hurried under their umbrellas, trying to shield themselves from the downpour. Among them was a woman walking alone. Her hood was pulled low over her face, making it hard to see much of her. The black cap she wore was simple but purposeful. It was her way of keeping people from staring at her. She didn't want attention tonight. Her name was Sandra, and she was tired. Sandra took a deep breath as she neared the entrance of La Majestic, one of New York City's most exclusive hotels. It was a place of luxury where rich and powerful people came to rest and relax. She had stayed there before, and tonight she needed a safe place to rest before an important event the next day. What should have been an easy check-in was about to turn into something much more complicated. When Sandra stepped through the revolving doors, the first thing that hit her was the scent of jasmine and vanilla in the air. It was calming, the kind of smell that made you feel like you were in the right place. Inside, everything looked perfect. The floor was made of polished marble that gleamed under the light from the sparkling crystal chandeliers above. There was a soft piano playing in the background, adding to the calm atmosphere. This was a place for people who wanted the best of everything. A place where privacy and comfort were part of the deal. Sandra didn't belong here in the way others did, but she had the reservation. She walked toward the reception desk. Behind it, a young woman stood with perfect posture. She had a sharp look in her eyes, like she was constantly assessing everyone around her. Her name was Claire, and she was working the late shift. She didn't seem too pleased about it. As Sandra approached, Claire looked her over with an almost invisible frown. Sandra's outfit wasn't anything fancy, a simple sweatshirt and comfortable sneakers. It was the kind of clothing that didn't fit with the usual guests of La Majestic. "Good evening, how may I assist you?" Claire asked, her voice sounding professional but a little hesitant. Sandra kept her voice steady and calm. "I have a reservation under the name Sandra Annette." Claire's fingers paused for a moment on the keyboard. She glanced at Sandra, then at the screen. "Sandra Annette?" she repeated, sounding unsure. "I don't see any VIP reservations under that name." The way she said it made it clear she didn't think Sandra belonged here. Sandra didn't let it bother her. She was used to this kind of thing. "I have the reservation confirmation here," she said, pulling out her phone and opening the email with the booking details. She held the phone out toward Claire. But Claire didn't immediately look at it. She let out a small sigh, the kind of sigh that suggested she wasn't happy with the situation. Then she finally picked up Sandra's phone, glancing at the screen for only a second. "Oh, of course. Let me check again," Claire said, though her tone was less than friendly. Sandra stayed quiet. She wasn't here to argue. She just wanted to get to her room. But something inside her started to tense up. She could feel the invisible wall between her and Claire. It was a wall that wasn't based on rules or the reservation system. It was personal. Claire didn't want Sandra to be there. The receptionist typed again, but Sandra could tell she wasn't really looking for anything. It was as though Claire had already made up her mind. The atmosphere in the lobby was thick with silence, the kind of silence where people start to notice something is off. Sandra crossed her arms, watching carefully but saying nothing. She could feel Claire's gaze, the kind of gaze that was meant to make Sandra feel small. Finally, Claire spoke in a dry, almost bored tone. "This hotel is for exclusive clients. Maybe you've made a mistake." The words were laced with judgment, the implication clear. Sandra didn't belong here. Sandra blinked slowly. She had heard those kinds of words before many times. She was used to being recognized in airports, stores, and events, but this time, Claire had no idea who she was. And maybe that was a good thing, or maybe not. Sandra didn't let the words affect her, but inside, her patience was starting to wear thin. She had a reservation, and she wasn't about to let some receptionist take that away. "I'm quite sure I have a reservation," Sandra said, her voice calm but firm. Claire didn't look impressed. "I don't see any reservations under your name," she said again, her fingers tapping impatiently on the keyboard. "Maybe you're mistaken. I can recommend a cheaper hotel down the street." The suggestion felt like a slap in the face. Sandra didn't flinch, but her frustration was growing. She could feel all the eyes of the guests in the lobby on her now. The couple by the fireplace stopped talking. The man at the bar lowered his drink, his curiosity clearly piqued. People were starting to notice, and Sandra hated being the center of attention like this. She held Claire's gaze, her voice level but sharp. "You didn't even check the system properly, did you?" Claire blinked. The question caught her off guard. "I'm just following procedures, ma'am," she said, her voice now a little less certain. "If you want, you can wait while I check again." Sandra could see through it. Claire wasn't following any procedures. She wasn't looking for Sandra's reservation at all. Sandra was being dismissed and she knew it. But she wasn't going to let Claire win. "Is your manager available?" Sandra asked, keeping her voice steady. Claire smiled a little, but it wasn't a nice smile. "He's busy. But I can check again." She turned her computer screen as if she was looking up Sandra's reservation. But Sandra saw something in the reflection in the glass. The system wasn't even open to the reservation page. Claire wasn't searching for anything. She had made up her mind and she wasn't going to help Sandra. Sandra felt her frustration growing, but just as she was about to speak again, something unexpected happened. There was a faint click, the sound of a camera taking a picture. Sandra's head snapped toward the bar, where a man in a suit was pretending to hold his phone at chest level. He had just taken a picture of her. Sandra's heart raced. The man recognized her. If he knew who she was, other people in the hotel would figure it out too. Claire noticed the change in Sandra's face. Her eyes narrowed and a smug smile appeared on her face. "Miss Annette, why don't you wait in the lounge while we sort this out?" she said, as if the situation had already been settled. But just as Sandra was about to speak, the hotel doors swung open. The wind blew cold air into the lobby, carrying with it the sound of raindrops. Everyone in the room turned their heads. A man walked in, his presence commanding attention. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit and a crisp white shirt. His shoes were slightly wet from the rain, but his confidence filled the room. He wasn't just anyone. His every step was calculated, measured. When his eyes landed on Sandra, the entire atmosphere in the lobby shifted. Sandra and the man exchanged a brief look, and without saying a word, he started walking toward her. Claire froze. Everyone in the room was watching, but no one dared to move or speak. The lobby was completely silent. The man walked directly up to Sandra, ignoring everyone else in the room. The energy in the hotel changed instantly. People stopped what they were doing and watched the scene unfold. "Is everything good here?" the man asked softly, his voice steady but with an unmistakable authority behind it. At that moment, everyone in the room knew exactly who he was. He was Keanu Reeves. Claire's face turned pale. She didn't need to ask who he was. The way everyone in the room was reacting told her everything. She had just made a huge mistake. She had dismissed someone who wasn't just any guest. Sandra wasn't a nobody and neither was Keanu. He had just stepped into the room and with a single question, he had turned the entire situation around. Claire would never forget this moment. Keanu took a deep breath, looked at Claire, and then turned his attention back to Sandra. She could feel the tension leaving her shoulders, and she could see that Claire's confidence had vanished. It was clear that she would never make the same mistake again. Sandra didn't need to say a word. With just one look from Keanu, everything had changed. He looked directly at Sandra. "Did I take too long?" he asked, his voice low but with a little smile. The words hit Claire like a shockwave. She blinked, unable to understand what was happening. The woman she had just dismissed, the one she had humiliated minutes ago, was standing next to Keanu Reeves, and he was talking to her like they were friends. Claire couldn't believe it. Sandra let out a slow breath, her lips curling into a small smile. "You know how much I love a good patience test," Sandra said, her voice calm. Keanu's eyes sparkled with a knowing look as he glanced at Sandra. The lobby went completely silent. It was as though everyone had stopped breathing. The energy shifted, and suddenly the power dynamic in the room was different. Claire, who had been confident just moments ago, now stood frozen, her face stiff. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Across the lobby, near the fireplace, a couple exchanged looks. Maya, a woman with brown hair tied into a casual bun, widened her eyes in disbelief. "Ethan," she whispered to her husband, nudging him gently. "Look," she said, pointing to Sandra and then to Keanu. "I think it's her." Ethan turned and looked closely. His eyes widened in recognition. "Oh my God, is it really her?" he asked, his voice filled with surprise. He glanced at Sandra, then back at his wife. What would she be doing here? Maya swallowed nervously, still watching Sandra. "Maybe she just wanted to have a quiet night? But look how that turned out," she said, almost in a whisper. Claire, still stunned, couldn't look away. She wasn't blinking and had no idea how to react. But then it hit her, the mistake she had made. Sandra Bullock wasn't just any guest. Claire had treated a big movie star terribly. The damage was done and there was no turning back now. At the bar, a man who had secretly taken a photo of the scene earlier was holding his phone again. He hesitated, unsure if he should take another picture or start recording, because whatever was happening in the lobby was about to become a huge scandal. Claire stood up straighter, desperately trying to regain some composure. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," she said, her voice trembling. "We'll fix everything." But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. Keanu's eyes, which had been calm before, now carried a weight of authority. "I believe my friend has a reservation here," Keanu said, his voice still soft but now tinged with a quiet strength. Claire quickly typed on the computer, desperately searching for the reservation. Each keystroke felt like a blow to her pride. Now she was genuinely searching for the reservation, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was already done. Keanu crossed his arms and waited patiently beside Sandra. She remained still, her face calm, but her eyes revealed something different. She wasn't angry, but there was a weariness in them, the kind of exhaustion that comes from dealing with situations like this over and over again. Claire finally found the reservation. She breathed a sigh of relief and quickly typed something on the computer screen. "Here it is," she whispered, trying to sound calm. "Yes, it was just a system error." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "A system error?" she asked, her voice cool but not angry. Claire turned bright red. Keanu, standing next to Sandra, let out a short, humorless laugh. The sound wasn't funny at all. It made the whole situation feel even more uncomfortable. That was when the hotel manager appeared. He looked pale, as if he already knew something was wrong. His eyes darted between Keanu and Sandra and then to Claire. He didn't need to ask what happened, he already knew. The entire lobby was waiting for Keanu's response. Claire, desperate to fix things, turned toward the manager. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply apologize for the confusion," she said, forcing a tight smile. "We'll make sure everything is perfect." But it was too late. The more she tried to salvage the situation, the worse it seemed to get. Keanu's gaze never left Claire. His eyes were still calm, but there was no patience left in them. "I believe my friend should have been in her room 20 minutes ago," he said quietly, but there was no mistaking the authority in his voice. The hotel manager nearly stumbled over his words, rushing to respond. "Yes, of course, we're handling everything right away," he said quickly, his voice shaking. Claire quickly typed into the system, printing out the room key cards. She slid them across the desk, trying to keep her hands steady. "Here they are," she said, but the words sounded hollow. Sandra took the key cards without saying a word. Claire couldn't help but watch her, hoping that Sandra would say something to make her feel better. Maybe something like, "It's okay," or "These things happen." But it never came. Sandra didn't give her a second glance. Claire felt invisible, and for some reason that hurt more than anything else. The lobby remained quiet. Everyone was still watching, waiting to see what would happen next. It was as if the whole room had become a silent witness to Claire's humiliation. Keanu turned to the manager again. "Sandra should have been in her room 20 minutes ago," he repeated, making sure the manager understood the urgency. The manager nodded quickly and rushed off to fix things. Claire couldn't even bring herself to look at Sandra anymore. She wanted to apologize again, but she knew there was nothing she could say to fix what had happened. The damage was done. The entire lobby had seen how she treated Sandra, and now everyone was witnessing her humiliation. Keanu glanced back at Claire one last time. "Let me ask you something," he said, his voice calm but carrying a sharp edge. "Would this system error have happened if I hadn't arrived?" His eyes were steady, watching her closely. Claire's heart sank. She knew the truth. If Sandra had been alone, Claire would have never admitted the mistake. She would have dismissed Sandra and sent her off to another hotel. But now, everyone in the lobby knew the truth, and there was no denying it. Keanu's question hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone around them. The manager seemed uncomfortable, clearly knowing the damage to the hotel's reputation was at stake. Sandra sighed softly, breaking the silence. "This happens all the time," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. The manager bit his lip, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He knew it wouldn't just go away. Keanu turned back to the manager and said, "Sandra should have been in her room 20 minutes ago. Fix this now." The manager hurried off, trying to solve the issue. Claire was still shaking, her hands trembling as she printed out the keys. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the moment would never be forgotten. Sandra took the keys without saying a word. Claire stood there, waiting for some sign of forgiveness, but it never came. Sandra didn't give her another look. For all the trouble Claire had caused, she might as well have not been there. It was a small but powerful moment that told Claire everything she needed to know. Sandra could have said something, but Keanu picked up Sandra's small suitcase and got ready to walk her to the elevator. The couple sitting by the fireplace was still watching them quietly. The man at the bar, the one who had taken a picture earlier, didn't take another one because he knew this moment was already special. Sandra and Keanu walked toward the elevator together. Everyone in the lobby watched them until the elevator doors closed. When they did, Claire felt like everything from the night had fallen on her. She had just made a huge mistake at work and she knew it wasn't over. Claire stood still at the front desk, feeling like everyone was staring at her. She knew her mistake couldn't be undone, and now the hotel would be talking about her for all the wrong reasons. Before, she was the receptionist of a fancy hotel, someone who decided who could check in. But now, she was the woman who tried to make Sandra Bullock feel bad and failed badly. The hotel manager, who had been trying to fix the mess, finally sighed and turned to Claire. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed. "Claire, come with me," he said. She blinked, still lost in her thoughts. "Mr. Harrison, I can explain," she said. He raised his hand to stop her. "Not here. Come to my office," he said. Everyone in the lobby could feel the tension. Claire walked around the counter trying to stay calm, but her heart was racing. It felt like everyone was watching her. As she walked toward the office, she felt more and more embarrassed. When she entered the office, the air felt heavier. The manager closed the door behind them, letting out a deep breath. Claire turned quickly, trying to explain. "Mr. Harrison, it was just a mistake. I couldn't find the reservation in the system," she said. But the manager didn't believe her. "Don't lie to me, Claire," he said, his voice sharp. Claire froze. She couldn't think of anything to say because deep down she knew he was right. He didn't stop. "You were rude to a guest for no reason. You made her wait and tried to embarrass her. And guess what? She's one of the most famous women in Hollywood." Claire lowered her head, feeling even worse. The manager slammed his hand on the desk, making her flinch. "But the worst part, Claire, is that if Keanu Reeves hadn't stepped in, you never would have fixed the situation." Claire knew that was true and it hurt her even more. The manager took a deep breath. "Do you know what happens next?" he asked. Claire didn't say anything because she already knew. The manager turned his computer screen toward her. "The news is already spreading," he said. Claire's eyes widened when she saw what was on the screen. There was a picture of the hotel lobby with the title, "The Majestic Receptionist Tries to Humiliate Sandra Bullock, and Keanu Reeves Steps in to Stop Her." Claire felt like she couldn't breathe. She started reading the comments and her stomach dropped. Wow, this happened today. The hotel must be ready to fire this woman. Has she lost her job yet? She should after this. Claire's face went white. She couldn't believe this was happening. The manager looked at her firmly. "This happened and now the hotel has to respond," he said. Without waiting for her to say anything, he said the words Claire had feared most. "You're fired." Claire felt like everything in her world was crashing down. "Mr. Harrison, no. I've worked here for years. This was just a mistake," she begged. But the manager stood up, cutting her off. "A mistake? Claire, you didn't just hurt a guest, you tried to turn her away. You humiliated her. And what if it had been someone who wasn't famous?" Claire didn't know what to say. The manager pointed at the screen. "The Majestic cannot be connected with this kind of scandal. You're fired. It's final." Claire felt like the ground was disappearing under her feet. She wanted to say something, to beg, but she knew it wouldn't make any difference. Claire left the office with blurry vision. The walk to the hotel doors felt like it took forever. She picked up her things, feeling the weight of her guilt. She walked through the lobby, trying to avoid everyone's eyes, but she knew they were all looking at her. When she reached the door, she paused for a moment. The security guard watched her. He didn't say anything, but his face said it all. She stepped outside into the rain, but she didn't try to protect herself. She just kept walking, not sure where she was going. She wasn't the receptionist of a fancy hotel anymore. She was now the person who tried to make someone feel bad without knowing who they really were. And the whole world would remember her for it. A few hours later, back in the LA Majestic lobby, everything had calmed down. The staff had changed shifts, and the manager had given strict orders to make sure Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves had the best service possible. Maya, the woman who had recognized Sandra earlier, was still there with her husband. She shook her head in disbelief. "I bet Claire will never judge anyone by their looks again." Ethan chuckled, sipping his wine. "If she even gets another job." Maya looked toward the elevators where Sandra and Keanu had disappeared hours ago. She had no idea who she was dealing with, she said. That night, Claire learned the hard way that respect should always come before arrogance. In her luxurious hotel room, Sandra Bullock sat on the edge of her big bed, feeling tired. But she couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the lobby. She ran her fingers over the soft sheets. Keanu was standing by the window looking at the city lights outside. "She got what she deserved," Keanu said, still staring outside. Sandra sighed. "Maybe. But what bothers me more is that this happens to people all the time, people who don't have someone to help them like I did." Keanu turned and looked at her. He seemed to understand what she meant. "You know you can't take on the world by yourself," he said softly. Sandra gave a small smile. Keanu smiled back. "You probably don't remember, but when I was just starting as an actor, I went to a party full of important people. You were one of the only ones who stopped to talk to me like I mattered." Sandra didn't remember that specific moment, but she knew it was true. She always tried to make others feel important. She swallowed, touched by his words. Keanu gave her a warm smile. "Maybe now it's my turn to return the favor." The next morning, when Sandra and Keanu came down to the lobby, things felt different. The staff seemed quiet and careful. The hotel manager rushed over to them with a nervous smile. "Mr. Reeves, Miss Bullock, on behalf of the hotel, I'd like to offer you a free stay and a special dinner as an apology for what happened." Sandra smiled politely. She picked up her suitcase and glanced at Keanu. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Harrison, but I think we'll be leaving now." The manager forced a smile, but it was clear he wasn't happy. Keanu picked up his own luggage and followed Sandra toward the exit. As they passed through the lobby, some of the staff lowered their heads. The car carrying Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves drove smoothly away from the hotel. Sandra smiled a little. "Do you think Claire learned anything?" she asked. Keanu sighed and rested his arm on the seat. She had a choice, learn from this or stay proud. "It's up to her." Sandra laughed softly. "Do you always have this calm way of looking at things?" she asked. Keanu shrugged. "I've seen a lot in my life. Some people never change, but others just need a shock to see things differently." While they were in the car, Sandra's phone buzzed. She looked at it and saw a message from a friend. It was a video. Sandra smiled a little. Keanu looked over at her. "What's that?" he asked. Sandra shook her head, still smiling. "Nothing. Just a little seed being planted." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "See? I told you it would make a difference." If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories filled with adventure, mystery, and excitement. Your support means the world, and it helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.